I hope you guys are having a wonderful pre-holiday. We are moving into Halloween, which is one of the best holidays of the whole year. Where else do complete strangers be super nice to each other and give each other candy? I mean, that is just, you can't get anything better than that. I'm going to share my screen in just a little bit here. Let's see if we can do this. We're going to do basically the same kind of thing that we did last week. Okay, there we go. It's working. We're going to be talking about a couple things that I think can be really unsettling. And there's something very important that I want you to be aware of as we go into this, that whether or not you believe or you feel that these art movements are authentic or valid, it really doesn't make any difference for the sake of this class, because for this class, we are at least pretending that these are valid. So if you don't like them, that's fine. Do the exercises anyway. If you're really disconcerted, that's fine. Just do the exercises anyway. We are learning about whether or not you like it, the art that we're looking at. We're learning about what other people feel is art. So I think that has a validity in it by itself as well. Now, I'm pretty sure I'm sharing this correctly. Let's see. All right, I am recording this, so please know that if you get on the call while we're live, know that everything is being recorded. So I try really hard not to pick my nose on camera or say any swears. Now, this last week we had kind of an interesting thing. We drove with our students to Las Vegas and checked things out. Went to Caesar's Palace and looked at a lot of art galleries, several different ones. And that was really kind of fascinating to see stuff that is popular now, that is selling right now in the commodity world of art. And it's really fascinating to me to see how people engage with different kinds of art. One of the galleries we went to was Park West. They have some Picasso ceramics, which I thought were really cool. But what was the most exciting part for me was I got to see some original prints by Marc Chagall, who I really love, and Albrecht Dürer, who I think is astounding, and Rembrandt. And it was amazing to me to see stuff that was done in a process I'm familiar with. I was a printmaker for quite a while, and to see it done with a specific eye that belonged to those artists was pretty amazing, for one thing. But also, the other thing I thought was really cool is that this was something that was alive, that they had designed and put together, in some cases, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So I thought that was very, very neat. Well, today we are going to be talking about a couple different art movements that are a little bit more contemporary than Albrecht Dürer, Marc Chagall, and those guys. Actually, Marc Chagall fits right in here, but Albrecht Dürer and Rembrandt are a couple hundred years earlier than what we are looking at. Dada, Cubism, and Surealism. Remember last week we were talking about Impressionism. I want to give a little bit of an idea of the setting that this belongs in. The art environment, because of the Industrial Revolution, a lot more people than previously, a bigger percentage of the population had disposable income that they could use to buy things like art. What this meant in turn is that artists did not have to function under a patron. They could create stuff in their own time scale and sell it as long as they found people that were willing to buy it. In Europe, this developed very quickly into something that was called the gallery system. In the gallery system, every season or every couple of months, there would be an opportunity to show your art at an area where people would come together. It would be called either salons or galleries. And this would be a time for the gallery owners to show what they felt people would should feel was in season at that time. Uh, what was, they would define what was popular and what was cool to have on your wall, because a lot of people, this was still relatively new. A lot of people still today don't feel comfortable, don't feel brave in collecting art that they enjoy. They feel that somebody else needs to validate somehow their good taste. And so preying or working on that kind of weakness, the gallery owners would create an environment in which different paintings would be presented as the in thing for that time. This is restricted to artists, because if you don't, if the galleries are portraying that these particular styles, these particular subject matters are the things that everybody's going to be buying, and that's what people are buying, if that's not what you feel driven to do as an artist, you're kind of left out. Or you feel like you're betraying your own personal truth by creating stuff that somebody else is telling you you need to make. Into this world come people like I'm sorry, I'm true, complete and total blank. But into this world come people who are rather sick of, they're artists, but they're rather sick of being forced to produce stuff that they don't feel like they want to produce, or that they don't feel is important or necessary to the environment. Because a lot of the times artists also feel driven to create things that respond to people's perspectives and to people's thoughts, or to help heal, or to address things that other people are trying to ignore. And that's the intent of works of art, is whatever the artist, that's the agenda that the artist has decided that they're going to create. And sometimes that is celebrating something, like the ordinary events of everyday life that happen with a regularity and necessity that they deserve some sort of respect shown to them. Maybe this is just enjoying sharing what you see in the light around you. These are the kinds of things that are really important to artists. So, well, in response and rebellion to the gallery system, several artists kind of banded together and started specifically creating art that did not fit into the expectations of the gallery system mold. I wanted to mention a little bit, we talked briefly about this, but I want to talk specifically about the difference between periods and movements. Even though a lot of things that you'll see and read and watch, we'll talk about art periods and art movements as the same thing. In general, there is a little bit of a difference. In general, an art period will be the art produced in the confines of a specific culture and a relatively long time span. For example, an art period would be classical Roman, which covers a span of maybe 200 or 300 years. Or it could be late kingdom Egyptian, which again will cover a period of several generations. And in that, we're talking about an art period. It is a period of time, a significant period of time, where the art is being produced so that it is visually cohesive and it is specific to the culture within which it's made. We rarely know who the artists are until much more recently. A lot of these art periods, the artist's name was significantly less important than the style within which the artists were working. An art movement, by comparison, is generally going to be artists that have either banded together so that they actually meet and talk to each other, or maybe they just have a very similar mindset and they're united by their mindset and their general ideas, and they specifically are responding as individuals to something going on in the culture within which they live. So rather than being a product and part of their culture, they're responding to their culture. And that generally means that the art period is going to be much longer because it is consistent with the culture. And an art movement as a response is going to be much shorter. So periods can be described as between 50 and several hundred years. Art movements may last a few years to 30 years. It's going to be within a single generation. People will revisit art movements when the similar issues come up, or when the thought of artists cycles back around to what was addressed in the previous iteration of that movement. So I think that those are interesting and good ideas to keep in your mind. So by this, we talked about how Impressionism was one of the first times that the artists could actually express what they as individuals saw. And the Impressionism happened because of how the world seemed to be changing with a lot of new speed, a lot of new advancements in how we understand how matter is made up and how we see light, for example, as well as how even paint was stored and transported. So Impressionism was a specific response to elements within the culture. Now, with Dada, Cubism, and Surrealism, each of these are addressing specific things that are going on with the culture as well. And it may not be that these guys are activists seeking to change the culture. It may just be that this is something that they're thinking about. Well, we've got to really address this because the world is different, and it's important to address these new ideas. We'll look at each of these in turn: Dada, Cubism, and Surrealism. But each of them are art movements. They lasted much less than 50 years. But what is fascinating to me is that they were powerful enough and affected the imagination of so many people to the point where their impacts are still being felt today. So think about that, and think about how these guys are going against a very staid gallery system where one month you may be told, well, the art that's going to sell is going to be pink and blue and it's going to have flowers in it. But that's somehow not what you want to paint as an artist. So we're going to look at Dada, Cubism, and Surrealism one after another. And then we have an exercise where we talk about Surrealist strategies. All right. Now, Hannah Hall is the artist who created this collage. Now, a lot of us have done collages in the past. That's something that we're very familiar with. But when Hannah did this, it was in right around 1912, 1915. Let's see, 1919 is when she did this. It was a very unsettling way of doing art for a lot of people, because everybody, just like today, we think of art as colorful paintings, and that's pretty much what it is. The word Dada came specifically from a baby's babbling, and it was designed not to have any sense to it. It was designed as just a made-up word because the people that were the Dadaists, the people that made up this movement, were specifically attacking the gallery system. They did not want to paint blue and pink paintings with flowers in it because it was October. They wanted to have a format where they could share what they felt like they needed to create, and then find customers that were interested in what they had to show or what they had to offer. So this shows you an image of the first Dada exhibition, which took place in Berlin, Germany in 1920. Now we look at this in comparison to what you think of as a typical art gallery with pedestals, with sculptures and paintings on the wall. And what we're seeing is some very interesting differences from that. First, people are invited to sit down and contemplate, which is very similar to what you would do in a regular gallery. But the differences start happening with, here we have a mannequin suspended from the ceiling. instead of straightforward paintings, we also have posters with text in them. And then we also see some of Hannah Hoch's collages. And these sculptures are really odd. They're not on finished pedestals. They're on kind of these chair kind of structures, or a stool. But if you came in expecting to see a regular painting gallery show, this is going to be something that is very unsettling. And that's what it was designed to do. So we can see there's a lot of collaged images on the walls, strange paintings, and a man who seems to be floating in the ceiling. This is, the strangeness that you feel looking at this is exactly what the Dadaists were hoping for. A couple of the techniques that they used, we're going to look at a couple of those. We're going to use one specific one. The photo montage is something that started pretty much as a product of photography, and specifically magazines and newspapers. In this, what the artist was doing was not trying to paint with anything. She was trying to create a network of related ideas using images that other people had already generated and type that other people had already created. So you see the word Dada in several different places. That was, they were not trying to make a lot of sense. And I'll see if I can explain this. Rather than creating an image that you could easily create a story for, what they wanted to do is highlight the process of the artist, because they were trying to get this away from commercial expectation directed by gallery owners to a more direct relationship between the consumer or the collector and the artist themselves. So they are using nonsense, and I'm kind of using air quotes, they're using nonsense to highlight the artist's hand and the process of making, as opposed to an applied narrative. So when we look at this, what Hannah is doing, she's making a very interesting title, cut with the kitchen knife through the last epic of Wiener beer belly culture in Germany. That phrase was not intended to make any sense. It doesn't have to. What that phrase is doing is referencing sometimes the nonsensical or highfalutin, odd titles that artists will give their work, especially when they're rather conceited or they want to be thought of as intellectuals. The title itself doesn't make any sense. So rather than pretending to make sense, Hannah just came up with a nonsensical title. The collage elements, she is making, these artists felt like they were being manipulated and driven by the gallery owners or the gallery directors at this time, which meant that the elements within their painting were decided by somebody else. So rather than creating just random elements, Hannah, to illustrate that other people were deciding what was supposed to be in their paintings, cut out images that other people had decided on and made separately from her. So the image itself was less important than the fact that it was something that somebody else had come up with. And then she's putting these together so that people can kind of enjoy looking through the different visual items. Here's a person here, here's a person here about a dancer missing a head or something. Here's another person over here, here's a doll shape. And so that you can kind of find it on your own, but whether or not it has any relationship to other elements of it is secondary, because she is making a statement instead about having somebody else decide for you what should be in your painting as the artist. And then the words, a lot of the times gallerists will apply or would apply narratives for the artist, saying, for example, okay, next month, since we're doing pink and blue paintings with flowers in them, I want you to do paintings about people walking in a garden path or exploring a park or looking at a bouquet of flowers. So the gallerist would be the person giving you the narrative or the story of the painting. And by Hannah cutting out these nonsensical words and putting them on, she was addressing that and is, in essence, making up her own story. But the story didn't have to make any sense. It was, again, pointing the finger at the individual who was just arbitrarily deciding what your paintings were going to be about. So there is meaning and message behind this, but it is not direct message. It is a symbolic message. That is, the images that somebody else created that were cut out become symbolic of the resistance to somebody else telling you what to paint. The words that were cut out that don't make any sense become symbolic as resistance to the story that somebody else wants you to paint about. So, and there is some really fascinating stuff going on, but if you look at it, that each of these elements actually represents something else outside of the painting, then it becomes a little bit easier to deal with. Now we're going to talk about Cubism next. This is absolutely fascinating to me. The reason why Cubism is interesting to me is because at this time, we were talking about the early 2000s, people are becoming aware that we live in a sea of space and a sea of time. They are becoming more and more aware that everything is in constant flux around us. Even the objects that we think of are solid are made up of particles that are in constant movement. When we look at something, since we are moving through a sea of time, we're rarely seeing things the moment that they exist, because we know of the speed of light. We are looking at, even if we hold something in our hand, we are looking at what it was a fraction of a second before we see it. You know, we live 6 light minutes away from the sun. So we don't see the sun, what it looks like right now. We see what the sun looks like 6 minutes ago. We are living 2.5 light minutes away from Mars. So when we look at Mars in the night sky, we're not actually seeing what it looks like right now. We're seeing what it looks like 2 minutes ago. And this kind of burgeoning awareness of time was fascinating to a lot of artists. And these artists started, like Pablo Picasso, started thinking, well, what if I created a static image that represented somebody moving through time? What, knowing that everything is fluxing, could I create a static image that showed this kind of movement and a shifting perspectives? With all this communication technology, we know that there are many different views that you could have, even of the same event. And what would it look like if I created a painting where it felt kind of like I was walking around the object or the people as they were moving? I wonder if I could do that. And this is what Cubism arose from. This idea of trying to share many different perspectives and many different moments of time, and the idea of constant movement, all within the same static canvas. So again, it is a departure from what people were expecting. People are expecting something where you take essentially a snapshot of a moment and paint that single moment. And to kind of rebel against that a little bit or work against that, Pablo Picasso, Braque, and other Cubists like Cezanne were working to kind of express a single image that actually showed multiple perspectives, multiple moments of time, all layered together. And so instead of seeing the whole entire mandolin from one point of view, we see it with, maybe there's a light source which shows a shadow right here. And a couple minutes later, there's a light source that shows a shadow right here. And maybe her hand has moved down and worked a little bit there. It looks almost like there's a thumb there. Maybe the strings are vibrating a bit. But the individual, the painter, Picasso, is trying to show the mandolin in one object. He's trying to show all those different moments of time in the life of the mandolin. So I think it's really fascinating. And we can also see, this is the left side of the girl's face. And maybe this is her, I'm sorry, it's the right side of the girl's face. And maybe this is her left cheek. Maybe this is her shoulder blade. and then the front of her shoulder. This is the arm that's kind of still, and then the elbow. Maybe she's moved a couple different times when he was painting the elbow, and so that's why he shows some movement there. And the hand, you don't see all the individual fingers because she's moved them around quite a bit. So, you know, we get this idea of the flexing movement. Now, Paul Cézanne was a person that was also an impressionist. And this kind of reminds us a little bit of Impressionism. The difference at what he was doing is he was using quite a bit larger brush strokes than a lot of other people were doing. And the brush strokes almost look like squares. So it's interesting to me that one of the reasons this is called Cubism is that instead of doing brush strokes like squares, it almost seems like the person is creating objects that look kind of like squares or cubes. And that's how he's assembling with these object building blocks. That's how he's assembling this figure so that she is moving through time. I think that that's really fascinating. And and you can kind of see how these different perspectives, these different viewpoints are thought about in Cubism. This is a diagram of a furnace, but we're shown a side view and then a top view of the same structure. And one of the things that Cubists would ask themselves is, what if both of those views, what would it look like if both of those views came together and were fused? And you can kind of see that where you have the side view and the top view fused together into a singular shape, trying to show that. We can kind of see that here with one side of her face, another side of her face, maybe a back portion, a front portion, the different movements of her torso and her hips as she's playing the violin. We can see all these different kinds of perspectives. And the background has this interesting structure to it because maybe this is from straight on and maybe this panel is from the side. But he's trying to show that from the same point, different points of view, all at the same moment. But seeing this diagram, I think, really helped us to appreciate what they were trying to do with Cubism. So we're going to go to Surealism. Now we're talking about Dada is dealing with the gallery system directly. Cubism addresses ideas of perspective and movement through time and space. Now with Surealism, we're kind of dealing with the idea that maybe things aren't always what we expect them to be, and maybe they aren't always what they appear to be. So again, Surealism pushes away from a straight one-for-one symbolism. Surrealism starts to address, again, this idea that an object that may look like a bird maybe could be used to symbolize flight, would be one obvious thing. Movement, like a hummingbird or a chicken. Maybe it's also being used to symbolize food, or eggs, or meat for the soup. Maybe it's also chicken would also be used to symbolize the human traits associated with the animal. So it's a way. Surrealism is a way of applying symbols that aren't straightforward, or expressing ideas with symbols that may only make sense to the artist themselves. And one of the reasons why this becomes so important is because at this time, psychologists are really making great strides in understanding what is going on with inside the human mind. With mental illness, one of the frustrating things, if you have somebody in your family who's struggling with mental illness, if I was to wear a cast and a sling or use a cane, people would instantly accept my problems or my issues as aspects of that physical injury that they can see. With mental illness, you don't see a cast or a sling on somebody's head. You just see the altered behavior. And for a lot of people, it's very uncomfortable for them to associate that altered behavior with damage done inside your mind. It feels a little bit more personal or threatening. One of the struggles with that is has been very difficult for a very long time for people to take mental science and mental healing seriously enough as a healing practice that people would actually get the treatment that they needed. With people like Freud and Jung, those are just two of the first names that popped into most people's head when we talk about psychoanalysis and the subconscious mind. People are being aware that in the unconscious mind has a lot of symbolism innate within it. Sometimes the symbolism we don't understand. We dream a lot of the times to process the things that we endure during the day, the experiences that we have. But we also dream to process feelings that we have that we don't name, or perhaps ideas that we generate that are not consistent with appropriate behavior. Things that we think about that are difficult to reconcile with the group that we live with, those kinds of things. And so this symbolism that goes on in a surrealist painting may symbolize things directly, and it may symbolize things indirectly. It may be a publicly shared symbol, and it may be a completely private symbol. Or, even more confusing, it may be a symbol that only has meaning in as much as it represents the fact that it's a symbol. I know that can be kind of confusing, but I want you to look at this and think about this for just a bit. In this painting, we have an ox here wearing a robe and a vaguely human kind of posture. Symbolically, this could reference anything from work to the wild. It could symbolize nature. It could symbolize agrarian culture, husbandry, things like that. It could also symbolize Christianity. In some painting traditions, Jesus is represented with the sacrifice of an ox. So it could be symbolic of that. Or it could just be a symbol portraying the idea that sometimes something that is shown as being in a respectful presentation could be rather docile. There's no reason to be intimidated by it. What I think is interesting over here, we see this structure right here looks vaguely ghost-like. We have this dog looking at it. Maybe symbolically, I mean, we've probably all seen our pets react to something that we can't tell is there. Maybe this is a symbol symbolically referencing that. Or if this is death, and maybe this dog has passed away, and this dog is asking death or looking at death, wondering why her friend isn't getting up. It could be that there's a death of loyalty, because that's associated with dogs. It could be that this just represents the engaged mind, the curious mind. Could be bunch, or the very loyal mind. Could be all those kinds of things. This kind of idea of pillars and arches makes this a vaguely or symbolic of a vaguely spiritual place. This, I think, is really interesting. This structure with this vague face, this makes me think of underwater plant forms. And it makes me think of somebody wearing a priestly robe of some sort. And it looks vaguely threatening, but somehow these two kids aren't threatened at all. And maybe these represent innocence. Maybe they represent purity. Maybe they represent a threat that we don't think is a threat because it's cloaked in or disguises itself as something that's innocent. We see these clouds that float just under the ceiling, which is not a natural occurrence. It's perhaps this is in reference to things that feel unsettling, or the continuation of time within a spiritual environment. Maybe these plants represent actual growing plants, or maybe because they're painted in white, they represent the ghosts of plants. So you see that there's a lot of stuff going on in here, and whatever the symbolism is that you take out of it is less important than the idea that the artist is trying to generate a conversation with you where you can begin talking about symbolism. And things are relatively realistically imaged. We kind of see that. This looks obviously a child, obviously a child, obviously a oxen or a cow's head, obviously a dog. But the different elements are put together in such an odd way that it does not feel real. It feels like this belongs in a dream. And it defies logic and what our expectations. So this is what surrealism means. It has elements that are real in it, but the whole thing itself does not feel like it could actually take place in the real world, only in a dream state. So that's a really good example of surrealism. A lot of surrealists would paint things that they only saw in their dreams, or they would expect to only see in dreams. And sometimes the name would give you an idea of what this might actually was. And look at this. The title of it is, "And Then We Saw the Daughter of the Minotaur." Which is a really interesting title. It's almost like Hannah Hawke's title for her collage earlier. It almost doesn't make any sense, but it sounds like it should. And perhaps this is related to a dream that the artist had. I think that's absolutely fascinating. So what Dadaists and Surrealists would do is they would generate imagery out of random or apparently completely disconnected elements. And one of the big reasons to do that, of course, was to help people get the idea that they aren't addressing specific symbolism. There may not be a narrative that they're trying to share with you, a solid storyline. Maybe what they're doing is letting you know that perhaps all the world, or all the things that you feel you're comfortable with, on one level are symbolic of something completely different. Maybe you don't know as much as you do, or maybe to feel comfortable, you need to rely on your subconscious and sometimes illogical ways of thinking about things. So I think that that's absolutely fascinating. Then the next subject that we're going to be talking about is just a reflection on Dada, Cubism, and Surrealism. I'd like you to go through those things and really think about what you've seen in those three different things. I would recommend even going to YouTube and watching videos that share somebody's perspective on Dada, Cubism, and Surrealism. See if you can get some other ideas, especially if you're concerned that you're not understanding it. Go through that, look at the art, look at those videos, and think about what these mean, particularly in the context of an environment where, in the case of Cubism, the world was rapidly changing, and they were trying to show several different perspectives at once. In the case of Dada, there was a conscious rebelling against somebody else telling them what they had to paint and create as artists. And in Surrealism, just an exploration of this emerging understanding and appreciation for the subconscious or unconscious mind. You know, that Freud famously said sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, but a lot of the times there's many cultural traditions that can help us to unpack the symbolism that we see in dreams. And the Surrealists, rather than making concrete symbolism, perhaps they were just exploring the idea of symbolism. So very interesting things to think about. You know, in the Surrealist strategies, I'm pretty sure I have photos. Yeah, there we go. I have photos that I did. I want to walk you through this, so hopefully that makes more sense. We are exploring ideas of both Surrealism and Dada in this exercise. And this exercise May not take you very long, but I want you to at least have fun with it. So for the first exercise is called Exquisite Corpse Sentences. The Dada artists would get together in groups and meetings that they would call Exquisite Corpse. And just because they picked two words, put them together and put them together. It didn't have anything to do with fantastic bodies or anything like that. What they would do is get together and have discussions about other things that they wanted to try or invent, or ideas that they wanted to follow through with, just to see what kinds of stuff they could come up with that would help them to address this ongoing issue of wanting to rebel against gallerists telling them exactly what to paint. What I need you to do is get 5 paper cups, bowls. You can even do it with piles if you want, but I would recommend something that makes it a little bit more difficult to see into it. And you're going to cut a lot of slips of paper, several slips of paper. And one easy way to do this is just to get like 5x7 cards and cut them into strips. Get Post-it notes and write on the back so you can fold them closed so they don't stick to each other. You can do lots of different things like that. So in the first pile, and you're going to make 5 different piles. The first pile, you're going to write on 10 different slips words like the, a, and. And so that's 3 different words, the, a, and. So you may do 3 or 4 of each of those. And you're going to fold those up so you don't see what they are and put those into the first pile, and that's going to be your articles. The second pile is you're going to write down 10 different words. They're adjectives. These are words that we use to describe or modify a noun. These are descriptive words like tall, long, green, or hollow. So you're going to write 10 different descriptive words, like for example, tall, short, medium, long, twisty, curved, heavy, light, green, maybe pink, blue, yellow, hollow, maybe filled, maybe spongy. So those kinds of words. Then in your third pile, and you're going to write 10 of those down, put them into your second pile. Those are going to be, like I said, your adjectives. The third pile, you're going to write down 10 different things that are objects, nouns: hat, cup, clown, building, tightrope, zebra, gorilla, cube, basketball, hat. All right, there's already hat there. Sweater, shoe, sock, those kinds of things. Dog, cat. So these are your nouns. You're going to put that so 10 different nouns you're going to put in your third pile. In your fourth pile, you're going to write down words that modify verbs. You're going to write down adverbs. And words that modify verb are what do you do, or how would you do something? When would you do something? Would you do it quickly, slowly, with thought, meditatively, morosely, sadly? And then you can modify the adverb. You can modify the verb by talking about when to do it as well. Yesterday, this morning, this afternoon, tomorrow, next week. So you'll have 10 of those words. Those are going to be in your fourth pile. And then the fifth pile, you're going to write 10 different words that are actions. These are going to be your verbs. Actions like run, assemble, drink. Some other actions are hit, eat, comb, sit, lay down, roll, bend. So different verbs, and you come up with 10 of those and write them down. And maybe that you do all this with a roommate or a friend, where you just start shooting words out that are adjectives, nouns, adverbs, and verbs, and then just write your 10 favorite ones down. And this is important for the Dada because what we're doing is generating a body or library of material that we can use to then create nonsense sentences. So you're going to mix up the slips of paper in each of those 5 piles. You're going to randomize each of the elements within each of the 5 piles. Now you're going to make 5 Dada sentences. From each pile, draw out 2 slips of paper and then put all 10 slips of paper together into a new pile. Repeat that until you have 5 new piles that have drawn 10 slips of, or 2 slips of paper from each of the previous 5 piles that you made. Each of these new piles are now going to have 2 random nouns, 2 random adjectives, 2 random articles, 2 random adverbs, and 2 random verbs. Open them up, look at them, and start putting them together. You're going to be making 5 sentences with completely randomized words that make absolutely no sense. And that's the important thing. These should not make any sense at all. Don't worry about them not making sense. Put them together so that grammatically they kind of fit. But if they don't make sense, that is exactly, you've done it exactly right. So write those 5 sentences out. Now the next step is taking those sentences one at a time and then doing a drawing. And the drawing does not have to be clear, clean, and professional. That's not it at all. What we're doing, and if you only do stick figures, that's fine. You only do stick figures. It doesn't matter. What you are doing is creating sentences. You've already created sentences. You're creating drawings where you're trying to imagine visually what this random sentence says. So you're going to take out one piece of paper, draw one of those 5 sentences out at random, draw what comes to mind, set that aside with the sentence. Sentence number 2, you're going to take a second sheet of paper, draw what comes to mind, set it aside with that second sentence. You're going to do that for all 5 sentences, so you'll have 5 drawings. And I really don't want you to spend more than about 15 minutes on each of those drawings. All right? When you get all done, you'll have those 5 15-minute drawings, and there'll be sentences associated with each of those drawings. Now, the third step is to take those sentences away, mix them up, turn the drawings over so that they're face down, mix them up, and randomly assign one of those sentences to one of your drawings that you picked randomly. So it's not going to be the same sentence that was there at the beginning. And then you're going to set each of those aside, face down. When you're all done with that, turn over the drawing with its new sentence that is completely random. It's not the sentence that you used to make the drawing, and that's going to be the title of your drawing. If you need to, if anything was original, switch it with something else so that you don't have any of the sentences associated with the drawing that you originally used. All right, so it's going to be the 5 sentences that you made at the beginning of the process, but you've switched it up so that they don't match any of the drawings that you had originally made to the original sentences. I hope that kind of makes sense. So if drawing 1 used sentence 1, you're going to mix it up so now it uses sentence 3. If drawing 2 used sentence 2, you're going to mix it up so now it uses sentence 4. Kind of like that. And you're just mixing them up. And then you are going to have, when you're done with this, 5 surrealist drawings with completely randomized nonsense sentences for titles. And they should not make sense. If they do, you have, you're exceptionally brilliant. But you're already pretty brilliant, but you'll be exceptionally brilliant if it still makes sense. Either that or you forgot you put the right one with the right drawing. Now what we're going to be doing is taking 3 more pieces of paper, and we're going to be folding them in thirds, just like this. You have a top, middle, and bottom. You're going to fold them so that the bottom folds in and then the top folds over it, so that you only see the top portion. And on that top portion, you're going to create on each of the three pieces of paper, you're going to create a simple head. And it can be whatever you want. Make sure that the lines continue past that crease just a little bit. So the edge of the paper is right here, the crease is right here. So you're going to draw a head on each of the three different pieces of paper, completely different heads. But you'll see where the marks go. Then you're going to turn that over and do your best not to remember where those heads were, which were the three pieces of paper they were on. And now, without peeking, you're going to draw a random body for each of the two line sets that you see coming down from that other piece of paper. So you're drawing the bodies without looking at the heads on the other side. Then the third step is you're going to mix it up again, and you're going to draw, mix these three up again. You're going to flip it over one more time, so you just see the bottom third of the blank piece of paper. So we drew on this edge first, this area first, second, the middle. Now we're only seeing this part, and we're drawing the feet or the bottom of whatever the object is. It can be a little bit difficult, but you have three of them that you're working with. Try really hard to randomize these as best you can so that you're not drawing the same critter all the way through each of these three different iterations. And when you're done, you're going to unfold it, and you're going to take photos of each of these new creatures. So you're going to have a lot of pictures for this, but you're going to take a photo of what you made. So in this particular one, the upper one was the dog, right there. The middle one was a bodybuilder chicken. And then the third was the bottom feet of a bat. So that's supposed to be the tail of a bat. So there's another one somewhere that has bat wings, another one somewhere that has a bat head. Just like there's another one that has, for this chicken body, maybe there's a chicken head on another one and chicken feet on another one. But for this one, we have a dog head, a bodybuilder chicken torso, and a bat's feet. And you can see I just did really quick sketches. You don't have to be very naturalistic on this at all. This is more of a fun exercise. So you're going to have, when you are all done, 5 sheets of paper. You have the 5 drawings that you did with these randomized sentences as titles. You're going to write the title, the nonsense title, on the random drawing for each of those 5. And then you're going to also have 3 images that are the random animals that you've made, or random objects. What I would recommend is taking all 3 of those all 8 of those photos, the 5 nonsense drawings and the 3 nonsense critters, and take those photos and put them all into a single PDF or Word doc. And then that's what you're going to submit. And what you're also going to do, and you can write this in comments or write directly in the document that you put together. You're going to write a paragraph of 3 to 5 sentences about how long it took you to make these things, how the experience made you feel. Is it curious? Is it unsettled? Are you uncomfortable? Do you feel liberated? Or do you feel like the whole thing was a waste of time? And I want you to think about the Dada and Surealism stuff we looked at and think, how related are these to the Dada and Surealism? And I think you'll find that what you do in these exercises looks very similar to some of those things. So that is basically it for today, just an hour long. But so we don't have a quiz. We just have those 3 elements to go over: Dada, Cubism, and Surealism. And I want you to write your reflection and then do this video. If you have any questions, let me know. But it's a pretty straightforward exercise if you enjoy yourself and have fun with it. So do that. If you guys are interested, let me know, and I will put in videos on Dada, Surealism, and Cubism as well, and each of those things that you can watch too if you'd like. So let me know if that's something that sounds interesting to you. So I'm hoping that you saw that. From my end, it looked like everything was shared. From my end, it looked like the volume was on, and I hope that everything works. If you guys have any questions, let me know. But that's what we're doing this week, essentially. And these, again, are art movements, not art periods. Art periods are generally going to be a lot longer. Art movements are going to be a lot shorter. Art periods are going to generally be part of the culture within which they exist, and art movements generally are going to be reactions to the culture within which the artists exist. In art periods, the artists generally are going to function as parts of the culture, expressing the art as itself. And in art movements, generally the artists are going to be expressing themselves. You know, it's going to be more of a personal expression kind of a thing. I hope that helps with everybody. And I hope that you guys have an absolutely wonderful week. I look forward to talking more next week. And I hope that you're getting something out of this class. Thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week.